afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this very special edition of our Way Forward Workshop Leader Lunch Break. Our own Bob Kirshner is joining us from outer space. But for those of you who are firmly planted here on Earth, we're pleased to welcome Dr. Marla Pérez-Davis. Dr. Pérez-Davis grew up in a small coffee farming town in Puerto Rico that didn't even have a traffic light. Needless to say, she didn't know any engineers and found out what an engineer is by looking it up in an encyclopedia. Thanks to a dedicated mother who was determined that she get a good education and who told her that she could be anything that she wanted to be, she pursued her education first at the University of Puerto Rico, where she was recruited immediately upon graduation by NASA to begin work and has remained there for over 30 years. Her early career involved doing research on batteries and fuel cells. She moved on to be the chief of the electrochemistry branch here at Nassau Glen, served as the overseeing project liaison and integration, the director of aeronautic research, and of course now she reigns as the director of NASA's John Glenn Research Center, where she oversees 3,300 employees and a budget in excess of $900 million. She is a key collaborator, both at NASA and in our community. She's currently working with the Greater Cleveland Partnership as NASA explores providing Wi-Fi to future astronauts, applying that same expertise to the barriers of digital inequality and Wi-Fi access here on Earth in Cleveland. She's a sought-after lecturer on college campuses, most recently at Purdue. And she is the recipient of many, many awards. Dr. Pérez-Davis, I suspect you have a bookcase full of them at somewhere in your office. They include the NASA Outstanding Leadership Medal, the prestigious Presidential Rank Award for Meritorious Executives, and outside of NASA, her work has earned high praise as Great Minds in STEM 2021 Engineer of the Year Award, a Cranes Woman of Note, Top 25 Elite Businesswomen from Hispanic Business Magazine. WKYC has recognized her as a Boss Lady of Cleve. Cleveland Magazine has recognized her as one of the most interesting people, and she is a NASA Lean Six Sigma Black Belt. She's a woman who believes in curiosity, commitment, and perseverance, and that they can take you anywhere. She has been heard to say, "When you tell me I can't do that, it sounds like a challenge." You may not believe she has free time, but she somehow manages to squeeze in CrossFit, cycling, creative cooking, and she is a proud mom. The first Puerto Rican-born woman to lead any NASA center. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Pérez-Davis.
Thank you, Marianne. What a nice introduction. You should have skipped the last set. Curiosity, commitment, resilience, dedication, and what a great time for me to be invited to talk to the audience here. Great time for NASA, great time for the nation as we prepare to have the first woman on the moon and the first person of color. That is really the new chapter of a new book that really is going to stay with generations to come. Same way as I was inspired by Apollo, this generation will be inspired by what is happening right now. So today I will be talking a little bit about, NASA Glen is not any longer the best kept secret in Cleveland. It used to be that way. We do not like that. So we are doing everything we can to change that, and thank you for the opportunity to allow us to keep changing that concept of being the best kept secret here in Cleveland. So Rachel, if you don't mind setting up the chart that I have for today. So I'm going to be talking about this chart. This is probably a very good way to, in a very short period of time, cover what we do here at NASA Glen. So let me start with probably the most basic information. We are one of the 10 research and one of the 10 NASA centers and one of the 4 research centers for NASA in the nation. And a couple of things, we do have the technologies for both space and aeronautics. When we think about, for example, Kennedy, they do a lot of the space, that's where we launch. When we talk about Johnson Space Center, we talk about the astronauts. When we talk about NASA Glenn, we talk about the technologies that are needed to be able to fulfill both aeronautics and space goals. So let's talk a little bit about aeronautics. A couple of things about aeronautics. We're looking into the transformation of aeronautics. We all have traveled. We all know about, the safety. So we'll continue working on the safety. But I will look at, let's dream, let's imagine the future. Let's imagine the future when we have urban air mobility. When instead of having a car, we hop in a little plane that is going to take us from point A to point B. And this is less than 100 miles. So we can go urban, we can go in rural areas. And the idea is to have these urban mobility devices that we can really expand and just, create a new economy. So that's one of the things. So we're working on the technologies to enable that kind of vision. We're also working in sustainable green technologies kind of enterprise. And the reason for that is because we want to be kind to the environment. The more devices that we have, obviously we increase, the emissions, we increase the noise. So one of the things that NASA Glenn, especially NASA Glenn, has expertise is in all propulsion aspects of, both for space and aeronautics. In the propulsion area, let's imagine again how a plane will look 10, 15, 20 years from now. If we go back, some of us, probably not all members of the audience, but if we go back and we think about the first time that someone started talking about electric car, when I remember when someone talked about electric car, I said, do I want an electric car? It's not going to take me that far. And I still, more comfortable with, the same way fuel, my gas, I would be good. And now, is part of what we do. We look at, electric car as a viable option. So imagine, 10, 15 years from now, that is what we call the transformation of aeronautics. We're going to rely more on electric propulsion. And believe it or not, here at Glenn, at the Neil 8 Armstrong test facility, which used to be called Prongbrook facility, we have the only test bed that can do electric aircraft test. This is the powertrain up to 1 megawatt, that we are the only one in the nation that can do that. So again, the uniqueness of NASA Glenn, the uniqueness of our facilities, our people, and the know-how of how really we can transform aeronautics. Added to that is the materials and structure. We have a key component in terms of materials and structure. We need materials that are, can operate in the harsh environment, but we also need light materials if we really want to enable these green technologies being more sustainable and the electrifying propulsion. The thermal systems are going to be different than what we have now. So again, when we talk about electrifying propulsion, that's one way to reduce the emissions, reduce the noise, reduce the contamination. The other part of it is the fuel, alternative fuels. And for all of these, technologies, we also have to look at, the architecture of the plane, how they look. They will look different. Another aspect of, the aeronautics and how we transform aeronautics is now we're talking about high speed. We are working with Lockheed Martin's Scott in a technology demonstration to reduce the low boom. If we go supersonic, we really have to work the low boom. Many of you remember the Concorde. That was, that is a supersonic. So we move to supersonic. We have to work in technologies that reduce that low boom. So we have been testing the propulsion, the architecture, how we look here at NASA Glenn, and working with the other centers to have this technology demonstration. We don't stop in supersonic. Let's think about hypersonic. And now we're talking about moving from point A to point B in a very fast, very effective way. For that, we need, materials that are different from the materials that we have now. high propulsion systems, we also need a different type of analysis in how we can enable and improve the performance of these airplanes. So again, imagine the future. And combined with all of that is, for example, something as simple as icing. We do have a very unique facility here. It's the Icing Research Tunnel. That is one of our oldest facility. And every plane that you have flight has gone through that facility. Why? Because we have to make sure that ice doesn't accrete on the structure. We also have something called engine icing. We also have a facility that we can predict, and we can make sure that is mitigated. So again, when you talk about changing the shape of the plane, we go back to having to pre-test, having to have the tools to predict what are the mitigations that we need to make sure that we have safe skies. So again, that covers aeronautics. And then there's space. We're going back to the moon. This time is going to be sustainable. So that means we're going to be living on the moon. That, if you talk about challenges, that is a huge challenge, because once we're there, a couple of things. There's the reduced gravity, and we do have a lot of knowledge in terms of microgravity. We have been operating in the International Space Station. We have responsibility for the combustion rack and of the fluid rack. And some of you will ask, so what? What is that? Well, the combustion rack, imagine if you have a fire in space. We need to protect our astronauts. We need to protect our assets. So we need to understand how fire initiate and propagate and how we can extinguish a fire in space, which is very different than on planet Earth. So with this rack, we have been able to see how fire start, propagate, and how to find ways to mitigate something as, that we could happen is fire, and it's for the safety of our astronauts. But that technology also find a way here on Earth, because we understand better about the fundamental of fire, and we can come out with design systems that can help, firefighter can help others to mitigate also fires here on Earth. The combustion, that's one. The other one is the fluid. If we are in space, now we have to deal with all kinds. It's the same thing as having a car here on Earth, right? We have to fill fuels. We need to know how the fuel is in the tank, how we store that, fuel. Same thing in space. So the understanding of how fluid behave in a microgravity is critical to be able to design the systems that we need to operate on the moon and also to move to Mars. Because going back to the moon and being sustainable is going to provide us a humongous advantage in terms of a test bed that is going to allow us to test these technologies to be able to go to Mars. So that's, one strong reason why to be sustainable, why to be on the moon. So that talks about microgravity. Then there's the cryogenic fluid management. It's a combination of understanding of, fluid, but also the systems that we need to be able to power and propel things in space. We do have, at Glenn, the responsibility for the power and propulsion element. The power and propulsion element is really part of the gateway, and the gateway is, imagine like a small International Space Station. It's going to allow the astronauts to go back and forth to, the moon, and also to change orbit around the moon. One of the things that we can do to explore the moon is that when we went with Apollo, we were in just one location. With the gateway, we can move around and we can allow ourselves to have more science done on the moon. We're going to use solar electric propulsion, which is a technology developed at Glenn. Again, materials and structure is critical. All the technologies that are needed for, again, enable both aeronautics and space, we are that center that provide power, propulsion, materials and structures, the biosciences, and the communication. As I always said, you can get the propulsion to get one place, you get the power to be there, but what good it does if you cannot transmit the information that you're generating when you are in space. It could be airspace, or it could be on the moon, Mars, or deep exploration. So again, we do have all of those technologies that become critical to be able to be successful and reach these goals that we have set for the agency and the nation. The other part of all these technologies is the impact on Earth, the economic driver. Many of the companies, and some of you are listening today, they come to us because they rely on our subject matter experts to help them with brainstorm and come out with solutions for a product or to enhance or improve a product that they are developing. Licenses, we also work and allow our partners and collaborators to use our licenses, software. So there's a lot of ways that we can collaborate to make sure that we provide the technologies not just for the use of NASA, for everyone. It's for the benefit of all. We work all our projects, majority of our projects, with industry, academia. When I talk about the power and propulsion element, that is with Maxar Technologies. It's a 60 kilowatt solar electric propulsion system. So again, we don't do things alone. It's in collaboration with industry and academia. And again, that technology, that benefit comes to Earth in terms of the economy. So that's an important driver for the state of Ohio. It's an important driver to the nation. The collaborations and the impact that it has in everyone's life. So I am going to stop right now, and I will take questions. And I can be talking forever about NASA. Let me tell you, I can go into all details, the usual stuff, just to stay within, aeronautics and space.
Wonderful. Well, we do have some questions that have come in.
Okay.
We will start. Can you explain a little more how the Glenn Research Center fits into the overall NASA network?
So we are one of the 10 NASA centers. We work in collaboration with all the centers. So when I talk about one of the 4 research centers, so we have Ames and Armstrong Flight Research Center and Ames Research Center in California. And then we have Langley Research Center in Virginia. The 4 centers, we are the 4 centers that work majority of the technologies for aeronautics. For example, Glenn has their expertise in propulsion, air breathing propulsion, and electrified propulsion. We do have that expertise here. When we talk about, like, for example, Armstrong, they do have the plane. So we do a lot of collaboration with them. We test our technologies and our hardware. Sometimes it's hardware developed by NASA, but the majority of the time is with industry. We test that in our wind tunnel, but the next step is to fly it. So Armstrong Research Center has, the asset or the aircraft to do what we call closing that technology gap, making sure that we test the technologies where they're going to be operating. Langley, for example, they also have expertise in materials and structure, but we concentrate more in harsh environment, engines, because the high temperature, the high pressure. Where Langley concentrate more on the structure, the structure of the plane. So I think that collaboration, that synergy, and in some areas that we have intentional duplication is key to be able to develop these technologies. So that's one example. In space is very similar.
So thinking about all of the research and the technologies that the scientists are exploring, can you give some insights into what that idea generation and that research process looks like? How do you decide which directions and technologies to explore?
Well, excellent question, because, it looks really simple, right? When we talk about an idea, how long it takes the idea. You look at, solar electric propulsion. This idea, this concept started 20 years ago. And it takes so long to be able to first make it, the feasibility of the technology, having the proof, having the design, and then find a mission where we can prove that technology can give the benefit that we, in paper, started, 15, 20 years ago. And all the tests that it goes around, the materials that you need, everything that you need to make it happen. Let me give you an example of shape memory alloys. This is one of my favorite. Shape memory alloys started, in the lab. someone came out with this combination of, the chemistry of the material, and then noticed that the materials would react to the environment. Shape memory alloys, if you have a shape memory alloys, you can control the material by heat or by pressure. So with heat, for example, imagine in the plane that you have all these actuators. When you look in the window, right, and you see the plane, the wings of the plane moving, those are moving parts. It's an actuator. What if we can replace that with a shape memory alloy? And it will react to temperature. Now you don't have a moving part. It's much simple and it's lightweight. So we just have an echo with the echo demonstrator. We just test that technology. That's a technology in terms of the conversion between space and aeronautic. We took that material and now we're using that materials for the next rover that is going to be on Mars. The tires of that rover are going to be made out of shape memory alloy. Why? Because they're very resistant. One of the things with the rover is how long you can travel, because the soil is very harsh. With these shape memory alloys, we have already tested that the tires last longer and there's no puncture to the tires. So that gives us more range for exploration of the moon and exploration of Mars. Best yet, we're working with a company that is using that material, for example, bicycles. For anyone that goes in bikes, one of the things that I worry always is like, I want to get a flat tire today. No, but it's going to happen, right? But if you have one of those tires, you don't have to worry about getting a flat tire. You can go on and on and on. So when I said a benefit to Earth, that's, one example of, a material that also have an application for all of us.
So as you are constantly thinking about the future, how far into the future do you plan? And how is the science and technology tracking towards meaningful breakthroughs for the priority areas you mentioned?
So when we dream, right, and when we think about the future, we should not put a limit. For example, when we said there's big difference in terms of thinking about the possibilities. Let's, think about living on Mars. Well, we know that there's certain scenarios and we have to have real life, real cases with what do we need to be able to be sustainable on Mars, and what are the technologies that we need. So that starts with an idea, but then gets really serious when you start thinking that the life of the astronaut are going to depend on your ability to first size the power system, size, what kind of, deliverables you need to have. You have to send things in before the astronaut arrive. And then, when we talk about sustainable, then you start thinking about, can we use the resources on the moon or Mars to be able to generate like oxygen or fuels, anything that we don't need to carry from Earth, because obviously that's weight and it's also volume that we want to save. It costs a lot to, fly anything, so we want to use the resources on the moon. So everything starts with an idea, but then it gets really serious when we start putting the pieces on part. It's like building blocks. It's like building things with Legos, right? You start an idea and they say, oh, if I put a Lego here, it's going to do this. In this case, it's more serious because, again, you really are designing for the sustainability and the safety of, the astronauts that are going to be there, and also for the science that is going to be conducted. So again, it's a process. It takes a lot of time. It takes a number of architecture. It takes multiple reviews. Then it gets really intense because then you go by programs, by projects, and you start reviewing all of these pieces and parts to make sure that they are integrated, but more than anything, that you have a realistic timeline, cost, and schedule for being able to execute that specific mission. So that's what it takes. When we talk about, even when we said, okay, we're going to explore deep exploration, we are going to go and look at the start, how long it takes to plan that. It takes time, and then it takes time to build the hardware, and go, time passed really fast. But look back, all the knowledge that we have accumulated just because the individuals that came out with the idea, with the purpose, and then the objectives, and at the end, the science that come back.
So for the next generation of NASA employees, what do you suggest they study in terms of their college studies? Are most NASA staff engineers? Are they aerospace engineers?
So we need everyone. We need every kind of discipline. Anything that you do these days is multidisciplinary. For example, even if when we talk about going back to the moon, it's not just about the technologies, researchers, engineers, scientists. We need STEM. Anything in the science, technology, engineer, math is critical. It's critical for NASA, but it's critical also for the nation, because we are in a very highly technology-driven society. So we need that. But we also need lawyers, because we need to understand what are the policies that we have to have in place. We're collaborating with internationals. So we need to make sure that we keep building the collaborations, the terms that we have 15 years ago. We may have to revise that. There's new laws, there's new regulations, there are new policies, there's new partners in the international world. So again, there's a lot of things that we need to consider. We need administrators, we need business people. So that's what I said, is a multidisciplinary approach, but we start with STEM. One of the things that I tell our employees is that even if you are in the business side of the house, even if you are in the legal aspects of what we do, you need to understand the mission. You need to understand the basics of the technology. And it's not to be the engineer, but to have an awareness of what are those missions, what are those programs, why, the objectives, why are we doing what we're doing? So a basic awareness and understanding of the technologies, that is critical. And we, the research and engineers, have to understand the business part of the house. We also have to understand the legal, the policies, all those things. So again, it's a very multidisciplinary approach. And I think, we do have to have that, diversity of thought, but that inclusiveness. We have to be very inclusive. Otherwise, we're not going to be successful.
So as you look ahead for the next 5+ years, what's your vision for the NASA Glenn Research Center here in our community?
So one of the things is making sure that we are well known in the Ohio community. The other thing is we want to have strong ties with our partners, with small business in the state of Ohio, with academia. So I want to make sure that we get known, but we also want to know what are the business, the industry base that we have here in Ohio, and make sure that we help them to be successful. Because helping them be successful, we are successful. And we're going to the moon, we're going to Mars, and it's all over about NASA Glenn and the technologies that we have developed throughout the years, and the work that we have right now going on to for both Artemis and for aeronautics.
Well, Dr. Pérez-Davis, we are so excited to have had you here today and share what's coming from the NASA Glenn Research Center and your vision. And we certainly hope that everyone on the call will help to elevate the work of the Research Center to make sure it is not a best kept secret here in Northeast Ohio. So we thank you for your time today.
Thank you for the opportunity. Have a great day. Thank you, everyone.